Hopefully everyone had a wonderful, joyous Hanukkah. Hopefully it was good. And you just felt the special, I don't know, it was something, I don't know, very happy about Hanukkah. It's a really, really, really happy time. So hopefully you felt it. So tonight, I want to talk about releasing pain. And I have a very vested interest why I want to talk about it. It was actually inspired to create this class. Nobody here asked me for it. Usually the classes are based on requests. People ask topics, which is what I always want because I don't know what to talk about. But this actually, I decided to do on my own. And I decided to do it based on something that happened recently when I was in New York. I went to New York the Sunday, like a week before Hanukkah. I spoke in New York, and so I was there for the weekend. And I came very late Thursday night. I left Monday morning. I spoke Sunday night, so I already made it a weekend. I was got to spend time with my mother, with my sisters, with my children. It was very, very, very nice. So I think it was right Thursday night. Someone spied me in New York, a former student that I haven't spoken to for years and years and years. And she asked me if she could meet me. And right away, my antennas, I have very sensitive antennas. I was like I knew why she wanted to meet me. I knew it, absolutely. And I'm like, of course, and I mean, I didn't really have so much availability, but I made myself available. And I met with her Saturday night for a long time. And as I totally knew, as my antennas were telling me, she wanted to talk to me because when she was in high school, I had done something, needless to say, I didn't remember what, so she started talking. I had done something that really hurt her. And she was carrying around this hurt for many, many years. She's probably 30, 31, 32 at this point. And she was really carrying around this hurt. And it was a very, very beautiful moment that lasted an hour and a half. I took an hour and a half to really listen to her and really empathize and really profusely apologize on many, 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 many different ways to say that until I really felt all of her pain, Baruch Hashem, left her. And I was thinking afterwards, maybe that was why I went to New York. I thought I went to New York to speak, but maybe that was just a ploy for me to be in this place when she would see me and have the courage to talk to me about it. And it was very healing. So what did I walk away from? I walked away thinking, wow, I wonder how many other students I have like that walking around in this world. It's a very dangerous thing being a teacher. It's a dangerous thing being a teacher. It's a dangerous thing doing anything to do with chinuch, being a principal, being a teacher. And of course, just as a human, you don't have to be a teacher or principal. We can still completely inadvertently, perhaps never know, but manage to really hurt someone. I had actually two other such situations, which maybe is why my antennas were sensitive. I had once, many years ago, as someone called me, a former student, a sweet, lovely, lovely, sweet girl. And she said to me, I'm speaking to you because my Mashpia told me I should talk to you about this because I've been carrying around this in my heart for years. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm thinking, what could I possibly done? She's such a sweet girl. What could I have ever done to her? And then she told me, and I could totally see it having happened, having no memory of it. Of course, I have no memory of it, but I totally understood what happened or how it could have happened. And I totally, profusely, sincerely, I feel horrible. Someone's walking around in pain for a year because of me. Apologized, and thank God, worked it through her, and she was clean. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I'm in the wrong business. This is too scary. Then I had another situation with, I remember I was doing a gathering, and someone in the gathering, a former student, said, well, I don't remember even how she phrased it. It was something like, well, what if someone did something to you and I don't remember, you still can't forgive, or I don't remember what it was, something along those lines. And I responded to the question. My antennas went off and I said, she's talking about me. Again, I had no clue what I could have ever done to her, but I knew she was talking about, maybe I didn't even know what this situation was a little different. I knew she was talking about me. And I found her number and I reached out to her and I said, this might sound really weird, but this was probably a few days or even weeks later. When you made that comment, I sort of felt you were talking about me. Were you talking about me? And she said, yeah, I was. So I said, okay, great. What did I do? And we talked it through and I was able to apologize very sincerely and we're able to work through it. So when you go through things like this, you realize there's a lot of people in this world that are walking around with a lot of pain for various reasons. And sometimes we could have done something that could cause that pain. And it's such a horrible feeling to think that totally, like, again, if you're a teacher or in any of those types of positions, it's very easy to totally unwittingly cause real pain to somebody else. This class is dedicated to all of my students. Any of them, if I gave them any pain at any point and I don't know about it, or I do know about it, I've totally forgotten. Hopefully whatever we accomplish today should just put it out in the air and it should help each of them work through their pain and they should be released from pain. And
Ms. Turn, if it makes you feel any better, you were only amazing to me.
Thank you, Shira.
No hard feelings.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's hurting someone is a very subtle thing. You could be a very nice person and you could still wind up hurting someone because it has so much to do with their space at that time, what you said, how they heard it, how you looked, how you commented, it's never mind the people that aren't, but even a person who's really trying their best, sometimes manage to hurt people. So that's what inspired me to decide to make this class tonight on this subject of releasing pain. And again, I dedicate this to all of my former students. I hope all the pain is just God helps and it's all washed away, anybody in any pain. So I want to speak about different ideas that I have, that I share with people when I'm talking to them about this idea of how do you deal with pain. When I say pain here, it's mental pain, it's emotional pain. It could be a current situation going on. And very, very, very often it's something that happened a long time ago, but it's still somewhere buried in your heart, in your psyche, and is really tremendously burdening you. And a lot of people walk around with that type of pain. That's not an uncommon situation. I think it's actually, unfortunately, a somewhat, for a lot of people, common situation. It's not a healthy situation, but it's not so rare. So based on my story, I'm sharing with you first what I think is the best thing to do to heal your pain. Now, this isn't always practical. It isn't always feasible. But if it's feasible, if it's practical, the best way to heal an inner pain, a pain in your heart, a pain in your mind, a trauma, any of those words for it, something going on in your psyche, is to talk to the person that hurt you and to tell them honestly, this is what you did and it really hurt me. And then wait for them to hopefully feel so bad that they hurt you and so sincerely apologize. And that is a very, very healing moment. If the person is really sincere and feels horrible, that, oh my gosh, I mean, I obviously if the person starts to defend themselves and deny it, it's not going to be a healing moment. So conversely, if someone ever comes to you and says that to you, like here, I was with this former student, not a young girl. I mean, she's in her 30s, but I was prepared because like my antennas told me why she was coming. I just knew it was that. So I was very professional. So of course, because your human knee-jerk instinct is to defend yourself, to deny it, to explain how they're an overly sensitive teenager and it didn't exactly happen that way. Never say any of those things, even if it's true. It might not be true. Here, I'm not saying it was true. I mean, it was so many years before I wouldn't, but I'm saying even if you really feel that was not what happened, don't defend yourself. They are not coming to you for you to defend yourself. They're not coming to you to hear all that you were going through that day and how stressed you were and everything you suffered. That's not why they're talking to you. No defenses, no denials. They're coming for you to say, I'm so sorry. I'm so, so sorry I hurt you. I so didn't mean it. I feel horrible that you've been carrying around this pain for all these years. That is such a healing sentence. Why? It just is. It just gives a lot of validation to the other person. They feel heard. They feel understood. And it tremendously releases what could be an enormous amount of pain. So if anyone ever comes to you, that's what they want you to say, and that's what you should say. Sometimes when I speak to people and I advise them to go to someone, I even tell them, you could tell them, I'm saying this because I need you to apologize. Now, you prefer to not have to do that, obviously. It feels much better if they on their own do it. But if they're a little slow, if you know they're not going to say it naturally, you could even prompt them. You could even tell them, I really need you to apologize. And then hopefully that will elicit it. Now, obviously, if the source of the pain is someone who's not healthy, who's just going to throw abuse back at you, who's going to totally deny the situation, who's going to show you how you were completely wrong the whole time, don't go to them for this type of healing technique. It's not going to work. You know it's not going to work. You know they're not safe. Don't ever ask anyone who's not safe to apologize for something they did wrong. Sometimes it helps just to you even like to write a letter to them that you never send. It's already a step in the right direction. For some people that are maybe they're going to be a little guarded, but they're not like completely unwell, it is best to write a letter, to send an email. It's still, if they respond appropriately, it still could be very, very, very healing.
And Ms. Tara, what advice do you have for people who would be more abusive back? How would you heal your own pain by yourself?
That's everything else I'm going to tell you.
Okay.
But this first piece only works if the person is a reasonably good person, even though somehow they managed to really hurt you. But good people can still really be hurtful, unwittingly, unaware, whatever. So if you know the person that hurt you is a good person doesn't want to feel they can't give anyone else pain, then you should gamble and go to them. If you could physically be with them, or again, a phone conversation, an email, a letter, any of those things. Again, you're making yourself vulnerable. So it's hard to make yourself vulnerable like that. You have to feel they're really safe to make yourself that vulnerable. But it is possible that someone really hurt you, but they're really a safe person, but they did really hurt you. Like the two are not incompatible. Like in my situation, I'm safe. I really hurt her. So I was safe enough for her to go to me with a lot of courage. I was very impressed, and I gave her a lot of affirmation for her having the courage to come to me about it. I could have said, oh, she's being so silly and it happened so many years ago and it was nothing and she's blowing it out of her. I mean, I wouldn't, but in theory I could have. So it takes a lot of courage to tell someone that, to confront someone, but it is very healing. It is very healing. So if someone is in that situation, or if you know someone in that situation who was hurt, but was hurt by a basically good person, it's the most powerful tool I know to create healing. Sometimes it's with siblings. Sometimes as a child, you were very hurt by your parents or by your siblings or by kids on the block that are your friends today. But they still very much hurt you when you were a child. Maybe they were teasing you and they just were teasing, but they really, really hurt you because you're a sensitive child. You understood it differently than how they said it. Not how they said it. You understood how they said it. You didn't understand that they meant it as a joke and they were teasing you. And you were very, very, very hurt. And you could be very hurt for years because of that. But in essence, this sibling of yours is able to apologize, or the sibling of yours is completely not able to apologize and you're not going to go there with them. But maybe they are. Maybe this parent is at this point in their life, at this point in your life, and then it's worthwhile doing that. And maybe they're not, and then it's not. Okay, so another idea, which again, maybe you are going to combine or share this with somebody who could benefit from this, And maybe you need to use several techniques to really heal. If it's a deep pain, it's not one isn't always enough. So another idea, which is really helpful for people trying to heal, is first of all, to make sure you really allow yourself to feel the pain. Because if you don't really allow yourself to feel it, it's very hard to heal from it. So a lot of times we like to be in denial. We like to pretend even to ourselves that we weren't really hurt. We don't want to feel that we're victims and we're hurt. So we just like move on as if nothing happened. But something very extreme happens sometimes. So you have to stop. And you have to honestly, to get rid of the pain, you have to allow yourself to feel the pain. You feel it, then you can move on from it and heal from it. And then how do you heal from it? By accepting it. This is sort of like maybe a counterintuitive idea, but it really can really help people heal. You need to feel it to heal it. Beautiful. Beautiful. That's a great way to phrase it. You need to feel it to heal it. Exactly. It's exactly the point. If you don't feel it, you can't heal from it, because if you don't feel it, you're putting it in the freezer and you're pretending it doesn't exist, but it does exist. It's this huge weight that you're carrying around, but you're pretending it doesn't exist. So you're just walking around, but it's very difficult to walk because you've got such a big burden on you. So when you feel it, you're acknowledging it. And then when you allow yourself to acknowledge it, you can come to acceptance. You can come to acceptance of who you are and of what happened to you. Meaning it did happen. Someone really hurt you. Really hurt you very deeply. And you could like give yourself the time to absorb that. I was really hurt. And now I have a choice. And the choice is to keep moving anyway. I was hurt. That's part of me. That will always be part of me. There's a God. There's a reason I need to be hurt like this. Maybe I'll figure it out later in my life. Maybe I won't. But now I have the choice to move on and do something healthy anyway. In other words, this is like the whole, I know I've mentioned this before because I remember coming up in another situation in a different class where I spoke about this idea of a person always having a choice to be a victim or a survivor. I heard this many years ago from the last surviving Mengele twin, who, I mean, I heard her speak like 30 years ago. I assume by now she's passed away, but maybe not. She'd be very old. But she was saying that when she goes around and speaks about her experience in the Holocaust, she says to people, do you want to hear my story as a victim or my story as a survivor? And that was a very profound concept for me when I heard it. And I was very young when I heard it, but it made a very deep impact on me. That we always have that choice. So you're healing from the pain by saying, yes, this happened to me. There's a God. There's a reason. And I'm going to move on from here and do a healthy thing. I'm going to move on and make a healthy choice. I'm not letting that define me and limit me. It's part of who I am, and I can move on. Shira?
Yeah, if a person is in denial and they're like using, I guess, something else to comfort them, whether it's shopping or whatever else it could be, how do they find that real pain to like start the healing process? Like, how do they stop covering it up first, with other things?
Sometimes they go to therapy. Sometimes it's a good friend. And sometimes just because God runs the world, what he often does for us in many situations is he shows it to us in someone else. And then as we're looking at the other person and understanding them, we have this like epiphany moment of like, duh, that's me too. Right? Like Hashem is very good at that. Very often for us to understand our own problems, because we can't. And our sages say we can't. Our sages say self-love covers over all flaws. So if a person is completely in denial, that didn't hurt, I'm strong, it didn't bother me at all, but then they're just obsessively shopping all day or eating or exercising or anything to run away from themselves. It can be a lot more self-damaging things and self-destructive things than that. But whatever they're choosing to do as their modality of running away from themselves, Hashem might show them another person also very frantically running from themselves. And they'll like realize, and they'll be like, oh my gosh, look at this person. She just keeps running from her problem. She's not acknowledging it. And she just keeps running and distracting herself. And then there's that opportunity to say, oh, me too. So if you're a good friend of a person, if you're a confidant of a person, if you have a relationship that you can say something, you don't want to say something hurtful, because obviously this person's been very hurt, but in a very gentle way, suggest something that could let them figure it out. Wow, I see you lately, you always need to shop. It's almost like you're trying to run away from yourself by shopping. So don't say anymore. Don't say, and the reason is because, let them think about it. It's like you're planting a seed. You're planting a seed. You can put your seeds down, and then eventually people have an opportunity to be honest with themselves. That's very interesting. The person that I heard, her twin didn't survive. You're saying this is something with two twins that did survive? Or you're saying the woman that I heard?
I'm not sure. There were two women. They both survived. However, one died very quickly after, and the other one, my son and I saw the hologram of her at the Holocaust Museum here.
Interesting. I don't know. I haven't been to the Holocaust Museum. Being me, I don't remember her name. She said like she was the last surviving twin, but her sister died the day Auschwitz was liberated. So her sister didn't survive. And she said she woke up that morning, she knew she was going to die, because she knew once one twin died, they killed the other one because they had no interest.
Worry that it might be her.
It might be her. She was an amazing woman with an amazing Rebbe story, amazing return to Judaism. And she was in general a very, very, very amazing woman.
By the way, the sister did die because the caregiver works for my husband. So she passed away, I think, a couple of years ago.
You're saying from the twin?
From the twin, yeah. You said you weren't sure she was still alive, but
she did die.
The caregiver, the lady who took care of her, works for my husband
Oh,
now. So he has a bunch of stories about her, and
that's.
Yeah.
I assume she had passed away because she would be very old at this point. So
Yeah.
it makes sense that she passed away. But she was an incredible person and really has an incredible what to inspire other people with by her story, by her journey. But this is answering Shira's question that yes, of course, sometimes we do see people we love doing this. And if you can, in a way that's not going to add to their hurt, bring them like, a few seeds, say things that maybe they're not ready to hear when you say it. Maybe they're going to want, our first knee-jerk reaction, like I said, is always to deny. So they're going to deny it. But it'll be processing in their brain more than you realize, and it might help them become aware of it. So that's really like another very, very good way to help yourself heal, especially when you can't speak to the person that hurt you. So has anyone here gone through this and done this work, meaning accepted a pain they experienced, and from that point of acceptance, we're able to heal? It's not like a rare, uncommon thing that I'm saying. So I'm assuming probably somebody, more than one person, has had that experience. Anyone, does it resonate that you went through something that was very hurtful and it hurt a long time, and then when you accepted it, at that point you were able to start healing from it?
Multiple times. Yes.
So you say yes, it does work.
Yes. And my second part of that comment was that like I learned while I was doing different things in order to, get through it and stuff. that There's a difference between surviving and thriving. And so we always say survive, survive, survive. However, really, once you go through it and you accept it and you go and you get through it and accept it that it happened, you can thrive, not
If
just
you want to thrive. Yes, you're absolutely right. That's a beautiful word choice, and I agree with you completely. Okay, so Simcha says yes. She's done this multiple times and it helped. Anyone else has done this and it's helped? When they've accepted the pain, accepted that this was what happened to them, accepted that this was part of their journey in this world, accepted that they've been through very hard things. Once they accepted it, they saw that actually they were able then to heal and to move on and not be bogged down by it.
Yes,
It's definitely happened with
go back.
me. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay. No, go Anna, go.
No, go.
Go
Okay,
Anna.
fine, I'll go. Okay, fine. No, I was just gonna say, pain is a funny thing. Like, our perception of pain is so much worse than it actually is. And like, as you're talking, I was thinking, like, there were times in my life where I would say more than a decade would go by before I would actually face like the thing that was so painful. But once you do, I feel like it's not as big as you thought it was in your mind. And the only way to have it shrink down or kind of dilute itself into nothingness is by facing it. Because all that you're doing in the past time by not thinking about it is just seeking false refuge. Like we were talking about, there's this woman, her name is Kara Brock. I'm pretty sure she's Jewish, but she's more like she's like a buju, more like spiritual, not really, but she has like a series about false refuge and how we seek distractions in our lives to not look at the real things that are bothering us. She gives an example of a woman whose husband was dying, and she busied herself. She went to help people, and she did like all this hesed work, and like she did like this, and she tried to just not be by his side because being by his side was so painful.
Painful.
And so we often do this. We do this to escape the present and then also escape past experiences. But from my personal experience, the only way to move through the pain is to see it for what it was and what it is, and not deny it, but actually move through it. Like,
even
see
if
it for
it
what
is
it
very
is.
big, meaning Anna's saying,
Even if it is very
you're
big,
right,
for
that
sure,
a lot of
for sure,
times you
definitely.
build it in your brain, which is so true, and she's so right. Like a lot of times that as we're pretending it doesn't exist, it's growing and growing and growing in that closet and making us more and more intimidated of it, making us more and more frozen because of it, or like you're saying, running from ourselves into all these, as you're saying, false refugees. Absolutely. But it could be a very big pain. But even if it's a big pain, accepting it sort of means, oh, okay, this is me. I'm a person who went through these things, and this is part of the composition of what I am.
Totally. It's part of
And
your
then
life
like
experience. Yeah.
that very awareness, just again, there's no magic moments. It could come back, but it's very powerful to diffuse it. Absolutely. Shira, what were you going to add?
I was just going to say that just from all your teachings of accepting this is what your soul has to go through, this, no one, whatever happens to you, Hashem send that person as a messenger for you to go through it. Don't be mad at them, don't blame them, but accept it and try to learn from it. And that's really, it's been so helpful in so many situations, big ones, little ones. It just, you look at, instead of looking at them, being, oh, they're so mean, they're so this, I'm like, you know what? I had to see this. What can I work on, for myself? And I just found that so healing and so liberating. It just feels better, not blaming somebody and not just carrying on this pain.
Absolutely. Everything we've talked around this topic for so many years, we've discussed this and touched on it, because for sure, the more you accept God as running every detail of the world and every detail of your life and every detail of what happens to you, that's a very healing, liberating concept. Oh, it's all part of his plan. This is the best thing for me, even it might not feel very good, to have gone exactly through what I went through. Is this part of his understanding of what my soul needs and what I'm needed for in this world? So you
I
can hear the
can
same concept again and
attest-
again and again and again and again, but each time you hear it, you internalize it a little bit more.
I can attest to having that kind of thinking help you out in crazy times as of right now for
As
my
of right
life.
now,
Yeah. So
Yes.
definitely works and helps.
Definitely works and definitely helps. Thank God. Has anyone done this and not experienced healing? Meaning, and it's fine to say yes, meaning like you could say, I've tried this. It's not the first time you're saying this, which it probably isn't. And I've really tried honestly accepting and knowing it's all from Hashem and knowing it's me and knowing it's what I need to have in my arsenal of experiences. And I didn't see any good healing after that. Did anyone ever have that experience?
Wait, what's your question?
My question is, did you ever try this and it didn't work?
Try what?
Try really, like Anna said, she spent like 10 years like running away from a certain pain, denying it. And then when she faced it, it diffused. That's what's supposed to happen. That's what I'm suggesting. But I'm saying it's possible that it doesn't always work. And that's what I'm asking. If anyone tried this, like they had a pain that they were busy denying and busy finding another refuge or a distraction or a diversion or something to not have to deal with themselves and not have to acknowledge what they went through. And then they said, let me stop running for myself. Let me deal with it. And they looked at it and they accepted it and they knew it was just part of who they are and part of their experiences. And it didn't help. The pain was just as intense as before. Oh, that's great. Meaning it does work. It is very, very healing. But sometimes, this is why I raised this question, sometimes there's multiple strategies we need to do. And sometimes especially, and this is true for anything in life, you know, your friend had this great herbal tea that did whatever it did for her, and she's raving about it, and you ask her for some, and it doesn't do for you anything, or it does for you just a little. We're all very complex. And that's why I want to give you a number of different ways of thinking how to heal and how to release pain. Because sometimes we need this combination, sometimes we need this combination, sometimes this is really the problem. So this is so beneficial. And sometimes that's not really the issue. So that's why it's not really as beneficial and I need something else. Sometimes something that can really help a person if they're like suffering with the pain of something that happened is to consciously relive it, to really go into that memory of whatever it was that hurt you and really try to talk to yourself. Because sometimes I found that some people have a little piece inside of them that's stuck at whatever point they got hurt. And like that piece, as I view it, like never grew up, sort of stuck in that pain and in that fear. And it's really helpful sometimes just to like talk to yourself and say, go into that experience and say, you know, we're safe now. We're not 10 years old. We're not hurt now. We're 35. No one's hurting us. We're safe. It just sometimes helps you release the whole experience. Just by like really.
If you remember experience, how do you know if you've healed from it? Like if something, I guess, hurt you as a child, how do you know if you really, you know, overcame it and you're really healed by it?
So if you're like, you've accepted it and you know it's part of you, and then you can look at what you're doing and say, do I have an disproportionate response to some things still that would indicate that it's still not really healed because I'm still very, very sensitive in that area? Or like a memory could like put me back in that space. I mean, if anyone's gone through real trauma, something can happen and like they're like, whoa, they're falling down that rabbit hole. Like they're just feeling it all over again. Or like a simple example that I see sometimes with people is for whatever reasons that they were hurt in the past, and then they just in their current relations, let's say with their spouse or with their children or with their colleagues, they just are so sensitive and they so overreact and they blow and they feel so upset. And so, I mean, they're not trying to overreact, they're adults, but they feel so upset and so hurt and so, so depressed, so negative about the whole relationship. And it's a response that's not at all proportionate to what's going on. So very often that, to me, is a sign that this is just a surface. There's something underneath that never healed. And that's why, like sunburn, a little touch, and you're like in such agony. So there's something in you that's bothering you so much. So these little touches that are not good things going on, but they're not such horrible things, but you respond to them as if they are. So those types of things sort of help a person realize, like, I need to heal on the inside, because if I don't, I just keep being stuck in this space of feeling so hurt or being so scared. Like, I'm so scared. What am I so scared of? Nobody's hurting me. But because inside I didn't heal, so I still feel that fear.
What you're saying, Ms. Torin, reminds me a lot of a method my husband was trained in. It's called HMR. It stands for holographic memory resolution. And he got certified in it because he was working with a lot of young patients who were deeply traumatized, and their perception of pain was so much higher than it would be on a normal scale. And it just, the method that you're kind of saying is literally classic HMR, because what this methodology does is, pain or trauma is registered in the body, right? It gets stored in us. Let's say it's like a childhood trauma or like an assault or something that's very, very traumatic. And it sounds like what you're saying is like what HMR says, and it's to go back. So what HMR actually does is it doesn't go back to the event. It goes back to T-1, which is the moment before the event happened. And it's a way to reprogram the mind from detaching yourself, your subconscious, from the actual traumatic event. And then it allows the person to move through their lives and process that trauma, but from an observer standpoint, instead of going through it again. So it's like actually really cool. It's something that I've noticed works on a lot of like people across, the spectrum of no matter what their trauma has been. My husband used it particularly with young women who were like teen moms who had a lot of sexual abuse. And, that was, a very big trauma for them. And it seemed to be very effective there. And I used it in my life too for like little T traumas, like moments in my life that were, my body registered as traumatic, like whether it's seeing an accident or something like that. But it's definitely something that is super, super useful, I found.
There are so many different ways. I mean, sometimes, there's lots. I'm just giving sort of like the most simple way to do it, because I'm advising you to, like, for a person to heal themselves. I mean, I could sometimes speak with someone and we could go through an event and just change it. We're rescripting it. We're rewriting history, and we write it differently. We make a different reality. And it sounds weird, but it really works. It's really very powerful. And if you do it right, it's a very, very, very powerful experience. So yeah, I'm not, yeah, I think what you're saying is, it's amazing that there's so much what Tyra says and so much what the world has found out that really, really all meshes in this idea. I think because we're so close to Mashiach, there's a lot of healing out there in the world. There's a lot of ways to heal that people didn't realize before. And again, a lot of Torah's perspectives has trickled into the world. And so the world, it makes so much sense that the world has discovered things that are healing truths that really, really are Torah truths.
Mrs. Turin,
Mhm.
is it, let's say you went through a trauma, you accepted it, you've healed from it, but sometimes, not but, but negates the beginning of the sentence. So, and you then, it comes up sometimes like you're sad because there's no real, like if the person was a real abuser, you can't approach them. You've accepted that happened. However, sometimes you're sad about it because it's a person, let's say it's a blood relative or a parent or is there a difference then, or is there a way?
We're allowed to be sad and we
Mhm.
move on. We're sad and then we move on. It's not, and that's what I
Right.
said before about the idea of like, it's not like a fairy wand and then it will never come up again.
Mhm.
A person could be, according to all estimations, including their own, healed, and then they could be going through an experience and it triggers it because they were going through it, they were exhausted, they were vulnerable, they were going through a deep experience, they had a flashback. I mean, all these things can happen to people that are healed.
Or
So
some,
it's totally legitimate to say, every once in a while I feel sad of what I had to go through, and you allow yourself to feel sad, and then you allow yourself to move on and say, but I accept that this is Hashem's will, and this is part of why I'm in this world, and I'm a different person and a more sensitive person and a stronger person today, and obviously I needed this experience because otherwise it would never have happened to me. But I'm allowed to be sad that it happened.
got it.
And the sad doesn't mean you didn't heal. You could 100% have healed and you could still be sad. Well, so that's a good question. What Simcha is asking, if I would take this and phrase it as a question, what does it mean healed? What does healed mean? Healed means the pain isn't stymieing you. Healed means you are not crippled because of the experience. You are not stuck because of the experience. Or, as we were saying, and as Anna gave us more information on, you're not so busy running away from the experience. Like, that also makes you stuck. If a person had a pain and they're not willing to face the pain, so they distract themselves by whatever they distract themselves, they're still not able to function because they're just too busy distracting themselves. So if you could stop running, accept it, acknowledge it, bring God into it, and then you don't have to run from yourself. And then you're not limiting yourself to, I'm obviously incapable because this happened to me. I'm obviously bad because this happened to me. I'm obviously, once you free yourself from all those negative messages and you make healthy choices, and you're not carrying this albatross around your neck, you can be happy. You can function, you can do great things. So we would say you healed yourself, you released the pain. Does that not mean you can be sad occasionally for what happened? Of course. Let's say a very simple example, someone passed away. Someone was very close to you and they passed away. And a simcha comes up, it's a yontif, it's a simcha, and they're not there. And you feel so sad. That doesn't mean you're not healed. It means it's a deep thing that happened, and it's totally healthy and legitimate and allowed to feel sad, and you're allowed to feel sad. But then you can keep moving because you healed, even though that doesn't mean that this thing doesn't give you still pain when you think about it. I hope that's a clear enough answer. I mean, what Simple was saying was a very good point, and I hope that's a clear response to that very good point.
Yep, thank you.
Okay. So obviously what we keep sort of saying, but I'm going to say it straight, they're like, obviously in Dorit's situation she's attesting to, is turning to Hashem, turning to God, asking for his help, that you should always feel he's with you, that you should feel you're safe, that you should feel you're strong, that you should know you're not being hurt. The more you internalize this message, you are not alone. God is with you. Everything that happens, he's orchestrating. It's all part of his good, loving plan, not just a broad strokes plan for you, what's best for you. The pain lessens, the pain leaves you. I mean, I have whatever situation, something going on that I have to look at it, it's very painful. And each time, and I tell myself this many times, this is all God. This is all my loving God. This is all my good God. This is a God that precisely designed this to happen. And it's all good. How is it good? I got no clue. But each time I say it, the truth of that truth, I get it a little bit more. I feel it a little bit more. We can forgive ourselves for being human. We can allow ourselves to need to say it to ourselves many times. And as Shira said, and she's right, of course, we've said that so many times in this class in so many different ways, because this is the most fundamental truth of our existence. It's all God, and there's nothing but God. And he absolutely loves me. And that doesn't remove the fact that I could have gone through many very hard things. And it doesn't mean he was happy that I had to go through a hard thing. but he knew it had to be. For some reason of my existence, I had to go through that. To become the person I need to be, I had to go through that. So you could envision God in my pain, feeling my pain, but orchestrating it because I need to go through that. And the more you can absorb and absorb and absorb that image, it automatically removes the pain. Because as Anna said, pain is so subjective to our own imaging of it. It's so subjective to our perception. And the more I feel God with me in the pain and God creating the situation, not just allowing the situation, creating the situation, the more I can get that this is exactly what I needed because that's why it happened. Has anyone done this and seen it helped? I do this all the time. As I said, every time I'm encountering a certain situation, I always tell myself this very, very strongly. Sometimes I can just say it a little and I'm already got it. And some days I need to say it more strongly until I feel the like peace inside. Anyone else? Anyone else has had those experiences that they've said this and it's helped?
Every day.
Every
that.
day. I can believe
Literally.
it.
Just even for little things, something always comes up. And so it's the mantra, but it's a real mantra. So, yeah. And I quote it to friends as we talk in the morning or in the afternoon.
And in between.
Yes.
Anyone else? Anyone else uses it and sees it helps?
I definitely think it's helpful, but I also think it's helpful when we don't necessarily like sit in the pain, but use it as a vehicle to like move us from one place to another. If the pain is from an experience that we had no control over, okay, great. It was a terrible experience, but now we have this experience to move us through the rest of our lives. And we have this perspective. If the pain was from mistakes we've made, okay, great. Also experiences. We won't make these mistakes in the future. I think pain can be an incredible vehicle to move us into different places in our lives.
Exactly. Exactly. That's the point I'm trying to say. And it has to be, because why else would God want us to go through that? Said pain is a vehicle to move us. A hard experience is a vehicle to move us in a certain direction, to give us a certain depth, a certain perspective, a certain ability, a certain empathy. There's a reason why God's doing it. It's to move us and to move us to a good place, move us to a healthy place. Which doesn't mean we want to go through the experience again. And we're not going through the experience, which we need to remind ourselves sometimes. But there's a gain from it. Otherwise, it wouldn't have happened. And another tool, and I know we've discussed this, for releasing pain is forgiveness. And as we've said, and I'm just saying it again in this context, and it's a very important idea, and it has come up many times because it's such an important idea that we all need to probably work on, is forgiving the other person doesn't mean what they did was okay. What they did, what they said, what they emoted, we're not saying any of that was okay. You can forgive someone who was absolutely wrong. And it's exactly what Anna just said. The forgiveness comes from a sense of, I need to move on. I'm forgiving because nothing to do with them. I need to move on. I need to release this pain. And until I truly forgive, I'm carrying it. So we want to move on. That's a sign of health. And we need to release the pain to move on.
So it's something that you said, I'm not sure when, but you said like, it really hit me hard because you said like when you're going to forgive somebody, you could just think that they were never taught or given the tools that they needed to give you what you needed, whether it was a parent or a teacher or, anyone who was, I guess, higher than you. And I find that really helped because it's so easy to judge and say, why did you do that to me? And how come they weren't there for me? And how come, instead of saying that, you're like, no, they were not trained properly. How are they supposed to know how to do? They weren't given the tools. They were never taught that. And I look at it as like, I appreciate knowing the tools now that you're giving over to us that we can, pass on properly.
Exactly. And that's a very, very it's a liberating thought because it liberates you from your negative feelings. It liberates you from that pain. Because when we're stuck in, but how could they have, and how could we possibly forgive? And therefore, how could we possibly move past the pain? And when you say they were doing the best with the tools they had, and they had horrible tools, if you could say, if it's true, obviously, if you know the person, it might be true. If it's not true, don't say it. If you don't know, don't say it. But if you could say they were a victim of trauma, they were a victim of abuse, generational patterns, if these things are true, and you know they're true, you can remind yourself of them and say, you know, they're acting out the only script they knew. So it doesn't mean what they did was okay at all, but I can forgive them. And I want to forgive them because forgiving them releases my pain. It's a very, very strong truth that when you forgive someone else for causing you the pain, you can move past the pain. And if you can't forgive them for causing you the pain, you still on some level need to feel the pain, like to justify the whole situation. So you're still stuck in the pain. So Shira's saying that it's helped her, this idea, which we have definitely discussed multiple times. Anyone else has done this and seen that it really helped them?
I definitely think that what Shira said is very, very helpful. However, I feel like if people are struggling with forgiving the person or the act, I sometimes feel that forgiveness is not about that person or that act. I feel like sometimes you might not be able to forgive the act, you know, or even the person, but it's not about them. It's about you detaching yourself from that energy.
And that's
I
what the
think if you
forgiveness
think
means.
about it,
That's what we're saying.
yeah,
That's
right,
exactly what we mean by forgiveness
right,
is the detaching. Exactly.
right.
So you're right. If you can't get to, so what Anna's doing is creating a great step ladder. If you can't get to forgiveness, the goal of the forgiveness is the detachment. But if you can't get to forgiveness because it's too hard to forgive, and you're human, we can forgive ourselves for being human, try to go for the detachment, which is not detachment, meaning I'm pretending it didn't happen and I'm just going to do other things to distract myself. But the detachment, like it happened, it's part of who I am. It will always be part of who I am. And I'm moving on. And I'm detaching all these intense emotions from it. It is history, and I'm only viewing it as part of history without any of the intense emotions. I'm consciously detaching it from the emotions. And that is correct. If you can't bring yourself to forgive, that's a great step in that direction. But has anyone else done this and seen that it really did help? And when they really forgave a person, it really, really lessened their pain over the situation? It works. It's worth trying. It's really worth trying, because if nobody else is saying yes, then maybe you don't want to talk about it, or maybe you never tried it. But it is very powerful. Forgiveness is very, very powerful. And again, maybe things happen and we can't forgive, or you don't want to forgive. And again, sometimes we don't want to forgive because we get into the space of they don't deserve to be forgiven. Forgiving them is giving them something they don't deserve. So how could I forgive them? So it goes back to what we're saying. Forgiving does not mean it was okay what the other person did. Forgiving does not mean that at all. Forgiving means, like Anna said, it's a tool to detach myself from carrying around this enormous pain. And as again, I agree with Anna. If you're not up to forgiving, and maybe you will be in 30 years, but if you're not up right now to forgiving, then what you really want to try, which is like a different way of trying to achieve this, is to just look at it in a very detached light. It happened. It's a fact. It's a fact that impacts, it's a fact that affects my choices, but it's a fact that I'm not emoting, because emoting it is just getting me stuck in it. I don't want to get stuck. Now, again, that doesn't mean I'm denying it. And like Simcha said, that doesn't mean I sometimes won't have a wave of sadness because of it. I can have a wave of sadness over very sad things. And I feel the sadness. I allow myself to feel the sadness because I am sad over what happened. And then I keep moving. Because I don't want to define myself in a way that makes me stuck in that space. That is me. That is the totality of my existence. So I don't have any ability to move. No. I'm trusting God and I'm moving. Which goes into the next thing I wanted to say, which might sound really weird, but I think it's really part of this forgiveness piece, is forgiving yourself for being hurt. Because sometimes part of our pain is a feeling that like we participated in the process. Like if someone hurt me, I did something that allowed them to hurt me, or that caused them to hurt me, or I made some silly mistake, or I was foolish in a way. So we end up blaming ourselves on some level. It can be very subconscious sometimes, but we end up sort of bashing ourselves and not forgiving ourselves for what happened. And it's really important that if someone hurt a person, for that person to say, I didn't participate, I was hurt, and release any thoughts that I was at fault at all. It wasn't that I triggered the other person. It's not that I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. You did nothing wrong. You have no fault, and you should never blame yourself on any level. And when a person stops blaming themselves, this also lessens the pain. And it might sound really warped, but it's actually really common for people to blame themselves in situations when they were hurt or when someone did something wrong to them. And again, has anyone tried this? Has anyone on their own realized that they were in a situation, they were hurt, and one of their takeaways was that they blamed themselves for it? They blamed themselves for causing it, for being there, for engaging, for triggering, for not being there, whatever happened.
So totally. So I've definitely had that experience. I feel like it's such a natural thing to go in and like to try to own a situation. I think the hardest person you can ever forgive is yourself. Forgiveness for being naive, for not knowing any better, for putting yourself in a situation, whatever we, create in our mind as our faults. I think like we are like the hardest person to forgive, not necessarily the event or whoever, it's just ourselves. Absolutely. I think it's like the hardest thing.
Absolutely. And it's very, very important. If, anything, the cleaning lady quit. Well, if I had been nicer to her, she wouldn't have. If I had given her more money, if I had given her more breaks, if I had given her more compliments, the husband never shows up anymore. Well, if I was lost weight, put on perfume, got off the phone when he walked in the door. I mean, we do this to ourselves all the time. We third guess, and we it's just a very natural, like Anna's saying, it just means we're human. We are all very human, that we blame ourselves in situations where we were hurt. And it's really an amazing freedom to say, wait, I want to forgive myself. Or you can phrase it a different way. I want to realize there's nothing to forgive. I did nothing wrong. And again, bring in the idea of God. Hand of God. It's all divinely orchestrated. I was where I was because God wanted me to be there. Then I have no responsibility for those outcomes. I was just put in that situation. God created it. The other person, they made the choice. I was just affected by their bad choice. I don't know if anyone has really consciously tried to do this themselves, because a lot of times people do, it's more often that people will work on forgiving the other person. It's much more rare that a person will realize that they're blaming themselves and realize they need to forgive themselves, or realize there's nothing to forgive. They did nothing wrong. But it's really, really, really amazing way to release the pain. So did anyone here ever try that, of really realizing either to forgive themselves or there's absolutely nothing to forgive? It's worth trying. It's worth trying if a person's been in a situation where they were hurt. Even if you think like, oh, I don't blame myself. Of course I don't blame myself. But then if you think about it more deeply, you might realize you do. You might realize you do. On some level, you do. Like, again, like Anna said, oh, all these things we tell ourselves, none of which are true. Give it back to God's court. He runs the world. You don't. He orchestrates events. You don't. In every specific situation, you always can see how you absorb blame, and you can always see how it has nothing to do with you. There's a God, and this is the plan.
Why is it that people like tend to blame themselves when someone hurts them? Where does that come from?
I would just say it's just a part of the evil inclination, the Yetzer Hara, because it's such a great opportunity. People have sometimes such a fragile sense of self, and people have so many self-doubts and weaknesses about their own. And the more a person's been hurt, the more a person has this weaker image of themselves, right? Like let's say somebody was always criticized, right? So every time you criticize a child, you're giving them a weaker and a weaker and a weaker self-image. And then they make a mistake, and then the parents say, well, of course you made a mistake. Like, who would expect anything less from you? Or they don't even say it. They just sort of roll their eyes in a way that indicates all of the above. So this shatters the person, and they absorb it. And they do start feeling like, yeah, I mean, even though other people are saying, no, it had nothing to do with me. But there's another person saying that says, what do you mean nothing to do with you? Obviously, you're the type of person this is going to happen to. So we absorb, from childhood, we absorb so many negative messages about ourselves. And some of us are really strong and really tough, even as kids, and we just deflect them all and we don't let them, or we were with parents that gave us lots and lots of healthy messages. So we're strong enough to know they're not true, but the rest of the world absorbs them. And that's why as parents, it's such a great gift to give our children just like understanding the poison of criticism and just pouring on that positive, looking at your kids and seeing how great they are, and that they should know that you sincerely think that. There's nothing more important than a mother sincerely thinking you're great. And again, I've spoken to so many people as adults who, as adults, are so insecure, and very obviously because of the criticism they experienced when they were younger from their father, mother, both, from the disapproval, from the sense that you're not good enough, you'll never be good enough, you always weren't good enough. So now these are very successful adults, but inside they still feel not good enough and unsuccessful and not worthy. So a positive takeaway from this, if we're sure about the other pieces, is really that idea of really building in our children that strong, positive self-image. Because I mean, inevitably in life, they're going to encounter critical people and negative people. I mean, that's a given. So, no matter how wonderful and nurturing you want your home to be, they're going to encounter negative, critical people at other junctures in their life. But the more you give them a positive, strong self-image, the more they'll be able to not absorb that negativity and criticism that at some point in their life they're for sure going to experience. Wow. Okay, it's late. I had 2 more ideas, but I think I'm going to stop now. I'll just touch for a second on the parsha because I know it's really late, but just an idea from the parsha. I'm going to make it really short just so you also have something to say at the Shabbos table. So this is Parshas Vayigash. And in Parshas Vayigash, the brothers of Yosef, the Shvatim and Yaakov, they go to Egypt. It's very interesting because when they go to Egypt, now when they were in Canaan, when they were in Israel, they were shepherds. I mean, it was an agrarian environment and they were shepherds. When they come to Egypt, Egypt is like the cosmopolitan center of the world. There's lots of sophisticated businesses, so to speak, going on there. And here, they're obviously very, very intelligent, talented people, and yet they stick with being shepherds. And it's so interesting. Like, okay, when you're in Israel, I mean, what other opportunities did you have? I mean, it made sense. You became wealthy as shepherds. But when you're in Egypt, where I say, no, we're shepherds. We only want to be shepherds. We don't want to do anything else than be shepherds. And the sages say for a very simple reason, because the Egyptians couldn't stand the shepherds because the sheep were their god, one of their many gods. Pharaoh was another one. Nile was another one. It was one of their gods. And so to be a shepherd of the gods, like, ugh. So they wanted to have nothing to do with the Jews. That's why the Jews stayed shepherds, because they understood how insidiously harmful would be that Egyptian influence. And therefore, even though they were so talented and so smart and so capable, and they could become the minister of this and in charge of the war department, in charge of this department, in charge of this department, starting up this big fancy business, they could have done all of that very successfully. They said, we don't want that. We want to stay shepherds. We want to understand the Egyptian influence, understand anyone is susceptible, and keep ourselves separate. We're going to stick to being shepherds. I mean, there's many, many, many other ideas in the Torah portion, but I thought that was just like a very short, we're not going to spend more time on it than that, but a practical takeaway that you could share at the Shabbos table. Thank you so much for joining. God willing, to be continued next week. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so
for
much.
joining.
Thank you, Mrs. Turin.
Thank you. We
thank
shouldn't
you.
have challenges. We don't need more challenges.
I mean.
Mashiach's coming. We're done.
Amen.
God, we did it.